Stop chasing people who only remember you when they are bored, lonely, or in need of something. In this video, you will discover why constantly seeking validation destroys your confidence without you even noticing, how emotional dependence silently controls your decisions, and why people begin to value you more when you finally learn to value yourself first. You will understand the hidden psychology behind attention, respect, absence, and emotional power. Stay until the end because each part of this video will slowly change the way you see relationships, self-worth, and the energy you give to others. And before we begin, subscribe to the channel, like the video, share it with someone who needs to hear this, and write in the comments, "I know my worth." Now, listen carefully. One of the biggest mistakes people make in life is believing that the more they chase others, the more loved they will become. But reality works differently. The more desperately you seek attention, approval, and affection, the more invisible your value becomes. People naturally respect what feels rare, calm, grounded, and emotionally independent. They move away from that. Painful, because most people spend years trying to earn a place in the lives of others while slowly losing their place within themselves. You answer messages instantly, hoping they will notice your loyalty. You over-explain yourself, hoping they will finally understand you. You forgive disrespect because you fear losing the connection. You stay emotionally available even when others clearly show inconsistency. And little by little, you abandon your dignity in exchange for temporary attention. The tragedy is not that people leave. The tragedy is that many people leave themselves long before anyone else walks away. There is a dangerous emotional addiction that modern society rarely talks about. It is the addiction to being chosen. Many people do not actually love others deeply. They simply love the feeling of being wanted. That is why rejection feels unbearable, too. It attacks their identity. It makes them question their worth. And because of that fear, they begin chasing harder, proving harder, giving more, sacrificing more, and tolerating behavior they should never tolerate. But the harder you chase validation, the emptier you become. Real self-worth begins the moment you stop asking others for permission to feel valuable. Think about that carefully. The strongest people are not always the loudest or the most admired. Often, they are the people who quietly understand their own value without needing constant reassurance from the world. They know who they are, even when nobody claps for them. They understand that attention is not love, proximity is not loyalty, and temporary excitement is not genuine connection. When you know your worth, your entire behavior changes, naturally. You stop forcing conversations. You stop begging for consistency. You stop trying to convince people to see your value. Because, deep inside, you realize something powerful. The right people never require endless convincing. The right people do not make you feel emotionally exhausted for simply existing. They do not leave you questioning your importance every night. The problem is that many people confuse attachment with love. Attachment says, "I need you to feel complete." Love says, "I appreciate you, but I will still remain whole without you." Attachment creates fear, anxiety, obsession, jealousy, and emotional dependency. Love creates peace, freedom, honesty, and mutual respect. When you do not know your worth, you become vulnerable to attachment because you are secretly hoping someone else will repair the emptiness you refuse to face alone. That is why solitude becomes important. Most people are terrified of being alone because silence exposes everything they have been running from: their insecurities, their fears, their emotional wounds, their dependence on external validation. But solitude is where self-respect is rebuilt. It is where emotional clarity begins. When you spend time alone without constantly needing distraction, you begin understanding your patterns. You notice how often you abandoned your boundaries just to avoid rejection. You notice how often you accepted crumbs because you feared having nothing at all. And suddenly, something changes inside you. You begin realizing that chasing people is not love. It is fear disguised as devotion. Fear of abandonment, fear of loneliness, fear of not being enough. But once you face those fears directly, you stop behaving like someone emotionally starving for attention. You become calmer, more selective, more grounded. Your energy changes completely. People can feel when someone values themselves. It appears in the way they speak, the way they walk away from disrespect, the way they remain emotionally composed during uncertainty. Someone who knows their worth does not panic when ignored. They do not beg for replies. They do not destroy their dignity trying to hold on to someone who is already emotionally unavailable. They understand that attention forced through desperation never leads to genuine respect. One of the harshest truths in life is this: sometimes people only value your presence after experiencing your absence, not because you became cruel, but because your constant availability made them comfortable taking you for granted. Human psychology often fails to appreciate what feels endlessly accessible. That is why boundaries matter. Boundaries are not punishment, they are self respect in action. When you stop chasing people, you create space for truth to reveal itself. Some people disappear because they only enjoyed your effort, not your presence. Others suddenly become more attentive because they realize they can no longer control your emotions so easily. And a few rare people will finally meet you with equal energy, equal effort, and equal respect. This is important because life becomes much lighter when you stop forcing one sided connections. The emotionally strongest individuals are not cold hearted, they simply understand emotional discipline. They understand that not every delayed reply is a disaster, not every rejection is a reflection of their value, not every ending is a personal failure. They protect their peace instead of sacrificing it to maintain unstable relationships. And this mindset changes everything because emotional stability is attractive, calm confidence is attractive, self respect is attractive. But here is what many people misunderstand about knowing your worth: it is not arrogance, it is not pretending you are superior to others. True self worth is quiet, it does not need to announce itself constantly. It simply refuses to shrink for acceptance. A person who knows their worth can still love deeply, care deeply, and support others sincerely. The difference is that they no longer juxtasize their vibes or destroy themselves trying to save relationships that only survive through their suffering. Many people stay trapped in unhealthy dynamics because they romanticize emotional struggle. They believe love must hurt constantly to be real. They believe sacrificing their mental peace proves loyalty. But healthy connections do not require endless emotional exhaustion. Real respect does not confuse you every day. Genuine affection does not constantly make you question where you stand. When you stop chasing people, you finally begin redirecting energy toward yourself, your goals, your health, your discipline, your future, your inner peace. And ironically, this is often when people begin noticing you more. Not because you became manipulative, but because your energy no longer screams desperation. You become someone who chooses instead of someone who begs to be chosen. That shift is life changing. There is incredible power in emotional detachment, not cold detachment, not heartless isolation, but the ability to remain emotionally centered regardless of who stays or leaves. Because once your happiness depends entirely on someone else's behavior, you surrender control over your emotional state. And people can sense that dependence immediately. Some exploit it consciously, others simply lose attraction naturally because emotional desperation creates pressure. No relationship will ever fully heal a person who secretly believes they are unworthy. That healing begins internally. It begins the moment you stop measuring your value through responses, attention, compliments, followers, or temporary affection. Your worth is not determined by who chooses you. Your worth is determined by how deeply you choose and respect yourself every single day. But the uncomfortable truth is that some people will only respect you after you finally learn to walk away. Not because distance creates magic, but because boundaries reveal standards. When people realize they can no longer manipulate your fear of abandonment, the entire dynamic changes. Suddenly, they see the strength they ignored before. Suddenly, your silence speaks louder than your explanations ever did. But reaching that level requires emotional maturity. It requires resisting the urge to constantly prove yourself. It requires accepting that not everyone will understand your value immediately, and that is okay. Not everyone is meant to stay in your life forever. Some people are lessons disguised as relationships. Some are temporary mirrors showing you the parts of yourself that still need healing. And some are reminders that self respect must always come before emotional attachment. The moment you stop chasing people, you begin attracting different experiences. Healthier conversations, clearer intentions, more balanced relationships. Because your standards rise, your tolerance for disrespect decreases, your emotional awareness sharpens, and perhaps most importantly, you finally stop abandoning yourself just to avoid being abandoned by others. Before the next part of this journey begins, subscribe to the channel, like the video, share it with someone who constantly forgets their own value, and write in the comments, "I will never chase again." There comes a moment in life when exhaustion finally teaches you what advice never could. You become tired of overthinking every message, tired of wondering why your effort is never matched, tired of carrying relationships alone while pretending everything feels normal. And in that quiet exhaustion, a dangerous illusion begins to break. The illusion that if you just try harder, love harder, sacrifice more, or become more useful, people will finally treat you the way you deserve. But human behavior rarely works like that. People often treat you according to the standards you silently allow. The person who constantly tolerates disrespect teaches others that disrespect has no consequences. The person who always returns after being ignored teaches others that inconsistency is acceptable. The person who never says no slowly loses the value of their yes. This is why self-worth is not just a feeling, it is a behavioral standard. It is reflected in what you accept, what you walk away from, and what you refuse to negotiate anymore. Many individuals spend years trying to become emotionally unforgettable to people who never truly valued them from the beginning. They analyze conversations repeatedly, searching for hidden meanings. They blame themselves for someone else's emotional unavailability. They believe if they were more attractive, more successful, more patient, or more understanding, everything would finally change. But sometimes the painful truth is simpler. Some people only know how to receive attention, not reciprocate it. Some enjoy being admired, but have no intention of building something genuine. And if you do not recognize this early, you can waste years trying to earn sincerity from emotionally unavailable people. One of the strongest signs that you are losing yourself is when your mood constantly depends on another person's attention. A delayed message ruins your peace. A cold tone destroys your confidence. A small change in behavior creates panic inside your mind. At that point, the relationship is no longer healthy attachment, it becomes emotional dependency. And dependency always creates suffering because it places your emotional stability in someone else's hands. People who know their worth experience disappointment too. They feel heartbreak, they feel rejection, they feel loss. But the difference is that they do not allow rejection to define their identity. They understand that someone's inability to recognize their value does not reduce their value itself. A diamond remains valuable even in the hands of someone incapable of appreciating it. And this perspective changes how you move through life. You stop chasing closure from people who lack emotional maturity. You stop explaining your pain repeatedly to those committed to misunderstanding you. You stop forcing yourself into spaces where your presence is merely tolerated instead of appreciated. Because eventually, protecting your peace becomes more important than maintaining every connection. Some people will call this detachment arrogance. It is not. What truly destroys relationships is not self-respect. It is desperation. Desperation suffocates attraction because it creates emotional imbalance. When one person constantly seeks reassurance while the other constantly withdraws, the relationship slowly transforms into emotional survival instead of connection. And the more one person chases, the more power the other unconsciously gains. This is why emotional control matters, not suppression, not pretending you do not care, but learning how to feel emotions without becoming controlled by them. A calm mind sees reality clearly. An emotionally desperate mind sees fantasies, excuses, and false hope. That is why many people ignore obvious signs for months or even years. They are not in love with reality. They are in love with potential. They become attached to who someone could be instead of accepting who they consistently are. Pay attention to consistency. Consistency reveals true intentions more than beautiful words ever will. Anyone can speak with passion temporarily. Anyone can promise loyalty during emotional moments. But real character appears through repeated actions over time, through effort, through respect, through reliability, through honesty during difficult situations. Stop listening only to words and begin observing patterns. The sad reality is that many people secretly fear their own worth, because once you truly recognize your value, you can no longer comfortably remain in relationships that require self-betrayal. You can no longer tolerate being treated like an option while offering someone priority treatment. You can no longer shrink your standards simply because you fear loneliness. And this transformation often feels uncomfortable at first because growth always demands separation from old emotional habits. There is also a difference between loneliness and solitude that many people fail to understand. Loneliness is the pain of disconnection. Solitude is the peace of self-connection. A person who cannot enjoy their own company becomes emotionally vulnerable to anyone who offers temporary attention. That vulnerability leads to manipulation, unhealthy attachment, and emotional exhaustion. But when you genuinely enjoy your own presence, relationships become a choice instead of a necessity, and that changes your entire energy. You stop chasing because you no longer fear emptiness. You realize peace is more valuable than unstable affection. You realize emotional stability is more attractive than chaotic passion. You realize that begging for bare minimum effort is one of the fastest ways to destroy your own confidence. The moment you stop accepting crumbs, your standards begin rebuilding your identity. Many people never say this openly, but some relationships survive only because one person continues tolerating behavior that should have ended the connection long ago. One person keeps forgiving, keeps understanding, keeps waiting, keeps hoping, keeps carrying emotional weight for two people. But eventually, emotional exhaustion exposes the truth. Love cannot survive long term where respect is absent, and respect begins with yourself first. The world mirrors the energy you consistently embody. If you constantly communicate fear of abandonment, people sense it. If you constantly overextend yourself for approval, people become accustomed to your lack of boundaries. But when you move through life with calm confidence, emotional discipline, and self-respect, everything changes. Your conversations change, your relationships change, your standards change. Even your silence changes, because silence from someone secure carries power, while silence from someone desperate carries anxiety. One of the most transformative moments in life happens when you finally understand that walking away is not weakness. Sometimes, walking away is the purest form of self-respect. Staying in situations that repeatedly damage your peace is not loyalty, it is self-abandonment disguised as commitment. And many people confuse the two for years because they were taught that enduring pain proves love. But real love does not require you to destroy your self-esteem to maintain it. Real love does not constantly leave you emotionally confused. Real love does not demand endless chasing. Healthy connection flows with mutual effort, mutual respect, and emotional safety, not constant anxiety. The moment you stop chasing people, you begin noticing something surprising. The energy you once wasted trying to hold on to others can finally be invested into building yourself. Your discipline improves, your focus sharpens, your emotional awareness deepens, your goals become clearer, and slowly, you become someone who no longer needs external validation to feel complete. That is the hidden power of knowing your worth. It does not merely change your relationships, it changes your entire identity. Because people who truly know their worth stop living from fear. They stop fearing silence, they stop fearing rejection, they stop fearing distance. And once fear no longer controls your behavior, your entire presence becomes different. Calmer, stronger, more magnetic. And most people will never understand that true power is not forcing others to stay. True power is remaining whole even when they leave. Most people spend their entire lives trying to avoid rejection without realizing that rejection is often the event that finally reveals the truth. It reveals who values you only when you are convenient. It reveals who only contacts you when they need emotional comfort, attention, validation, or entertainment. And more importantly, it reveals how much of yourself you were willing to sacrifice just to avoid feeling alone. The fear of losing people has destroyed more self-respect than rejection itself ever could. Because fear makes people tolerate behavior that slowly poisons their confidence. Fear makes them stay silent when boundaries are crossed. Fear makes them apologize for emotions that should have been respected. Fear turns intelligent people into emotional prisoners inside one-sided relationships. And the dangerous part is that this rarely happens suddenly. It happens gradually, quietly. You begin checking your phone more often than you check your own mental state. You begin prioritizing someone else's moods over your inner peace. You become emotionally available at all times while receiving inconsistency in return, and eventually, your entire emotional world begins orbiting around another person's attention. At that point, you are no longer connected through love, you are controlled through attachment. This is why self awareness matters so much. If you do not understand your emotional wounds, people will unknowingly, and sometimes knowingly, control you through them. Someone who fears abandonment becomes easy to manipulate through distance. Someone desperate for validation becomes easy to manipulate through attention. Someone terrified of loneliness becomes willing to tolerate almost anything just to keep people close. But healing changes that. Healing teaches you to pause before reacting emotionally. It teaches you to observe behavior instead of instantly defending it. It teaches you that effort without reciprocity is not noble forever. Eventually, it becomes self-neglect. And perhaps the hardest lesson of all, healing teaches you that not everyone deserves unlimited access to your energy. Many people misunderstand emotional availability. They believe constantly giving, constantly replying, constantly fixing, constantly understanding, constantly sacrificing makes them lovable. But endless availability without boundaries often creates the opposite effect. People unconsciously begin taking you for granted because there is no emotional cost to losing your attention. Your presence becomes predictable instead of valuable. This does not mean you should become cold or manipulative. It means you should become selective. Selective with your energy, selective with your time, selective with who receives emotional access to you, because your attention is part of your life. Every minute spent chasing someone emotionally unavailable is a minute stolen from your own growth. There is a reason emotionally secure individuals appear calm even during uncertainty. It is not because they never care. It is because they no longer panic when outcomes fall outside their control. They understand a truth that emotionally dependent people struggle to accept. You cannot force consistency, loyalty, respect, or love from anyone. You can only observe behavior and decide whether it aligns with your standards. This mindset creates emotional freedom. Suddenly, you stop wasting energy trying to decode mixed signals. Mixed signals usually mean mixed feelings. Confusion itself becomes clarity. Someone genuinely interested in you does not consistently create emotional uncertainty. They communicate, they show effort, they make their intentions visible through action, not endless ambiguity. And yet, many people continue chasing because they are addicted to emotional hope. Hope can become dangerous when disconnected from reality. It convinces people to wait years for effort that never arrives. It convinces them to romanticize inconsistency. It convinces them to ignore patterns while focusing only on rare moments of affection. But isolated moments do not define relationships. Patterns do. The patterns always tell the truth. Pay attention to who only appears when you begin pulling away. Pay attention to who disappears the moment you stop initiating everything. Pay attention to who enjoys your emotional support but never supports you during your difficult moments. These patterns reveal emotional imbalance more clearly than words ever will. One of the greatest acts of self-respect is accepting reality without trying to rewrite it emotionally. Some people are not ready to love you correctly. Some are too emotionally immature. Some are too selfish. Some are too damaged. Some simply do not value you enough. And while that truth hurts, accepting it saves you from wasting years trying to earn emotional reciprocity from people incapable of giving it. You must understand something deeply. Your worth does not increase when someone finally notices it. Your worth already exists independent of recognition. This is where many people lose themselves. They believe being chosen creates value. But valuable people are not valuable because others approve of them. They are valuable because they possess self-respect, emotional discipline, integrity, and inner stability, even when nobody applauds them. The strongest transformation happens when you stop viewing yourself through the eyes of people who fail to appreciate you. Imagine judging the beauty of the ocean based on someone who has only lived in the desert. Some people simply lack the emotional depth required to recognize genuine value. Their inability to appreciate you is not proof of your inadequacy. Many individuals unknowingly repeat the same emotional cycle throughout life. They chase emotionally unavailable people because chaos feels familiar. Healthy attention feels boring to them because they were conditioned to associate love with instability, inconsistency, or emotional struggle. This is why emotional healing often feels uncomfortable at first. Peace feels unfamiliar to nervous systems addicted to chaos. But eventually, peace becomes addictive too. You begin enjoying calm conversations instead of emotional games. You begin appreciating consistency more than intensity. You begin valuing honesty more than temporary excitement. And for the first time, relationships stop feeling like emotional survival. They start feeling safe. That is when you realize how exhausting chasing truly was. You were never asking for too much. You were simply asking the wrong people. There is a massive difference between someone being incapable of loving you properly and you being unworthy of love. Never confuse the two. The people who truly know their worth understand that silence can communicate more powerfully than endless explanations. They no longer argue to prove their value. They no longer beg for understanding from people committed to misunderstanding them. They no longer chase closure from those incapable of emotional accountability. Sometimes closure is simply realizing that your peace matters more than another conversation that changes nothing. And once you fully understand that, your entire presence changes. You stop reacting impulsively. You stop seeking validation everywhere. You stop shrinking yourself to remain accepted. You stop abandoning your standards for temporary connection. And quietly, almost without noticing, you become emotionally dangerous in the best possible way. Not dangerous because you manipulate others. Dangerous because you can no longer be emotionally controlled through fear, attention, or inconsistency. Your self-worth becomes internal instead of dependent on external approval. That is rare, and rare things are never chased. They are valued. At some point, you finally understand that peace is more important than being constantly understood by everyone. You stop explaining yourself to people who already decided to misunderstand you. You stop trying to prove your loyalty to those who only notice your absence after benefiting from your presence. And slowly, your life begins changing in ways you never expected. Not because the world suddenly became kinder, but because you became stronger. The truth is that people who know their worth move differently. They no longer chase temporary attention because they understand attention is cheap, while genuine respect is rare. They no longer panic when someone becomes distant because they know emotionally healthy connections do not require constant pursuit. And perhaps most importantly, they stop abandoning themselves just to avoid being abandoned by others. That shift changes everything. Your conversations become calmer, your decisions become clearer, your emotions become more stable. And your relationships become more honest because you are no longer negotiating from fear. You begin realizing that not every ending is a tragedy. Some endings are corrections. Some people leave because they can no longer benefit from your lack of boundaries. Others leave because your growth no longer allows unhealthy dynamics to continue. And while losing people may hurt temporarily, losing yourself hurts far longer. Never forget this. The right people will never require you to destroy your mental peace just to keep them in your life. The right people will appreciate your effort instead of exploiting it. They will communicate instead of creating confusion. They will value your presence before your absence teaches them its importance. Healthy connection does not feel like emotional warfare every day. And if someone only values you after you stop chasing them, then what they truly valued was your attention, not you. That is why self-worth matters so deeply. It protects you from becoming emotionally addicted to people who only offer temporary validation. It protects your mind from overthinking every silence and every delayed reply. It reminds you that your value does not disappear simply because someone failed to recognize it. Real confidence is quiet. It does not beg. It does not force. It does not chase endlessly. It simply stands firm in its own value and allows people to either respect it or walk away. And ironically, this is often when life begins bringing healthier people into your world, because when desperation disappears, clarity appears. You stop seeking people who drain you. You stop romanticizing inconsistency. You stop settling for emotional crumbs. And for the first time in a long time, you begin choosing yourself without guilt. That is the hidden freedom most people spend years searching for. Not the freedom of controlling others, but the freedom of no longer needing to. Now, as this video comes to a close, remember this carefully. Your worth was never created by someone's attention, approval, or affection. Your worth existed long before anyone arrived, and it will continue existing even after people leave. The moment you fully understand that, chasing ends, fear weakens, and peace finally begins. If this video spoke to you, subscribe to the channel, like the video, and share it with someone who needs this message today. And in the comments, write, "I know my worth." Your comment may become the reminder that helps someone else stop chasing and start respecting themselves again.